Happy 20th birthday, Firefox. Well, sort of. This anniversary feels a little less celebratory and a lot more like everyone's holding their breath.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one.
You see, right before we hit this milestone, there was a wave of news about Firefox. Layoffs, budget cuts, and all these analysts asking, is this the end?
The timing is certainly interesting.
It's more than just a company having a rough patch, right?
Yeah.
This whole situation with Firefox, it feels like a perfect storm.
Right, and the articles you sent over in French and English, they paint this picture that's kind of like looking back at old photos, bittersweet.
Totally. So in this deep dive, we're going to go deep on Firefox's journey. The massive success, the sudden decline, and all the legal battles that are making this anniversary feel, well, a bit like we're writing a eulogy.
Yeah, it's kind of dramatic, isn't it?
Is this really the end of the road for Firefox?
Well, that's the big question. And what I find fascinating is that the articles you've chosen don't just lay out the problems. They make us ask, is Firefox a victim here, or did they make some missteps along the way?
Okay, so to understand that, where do we even begin?
We have to look at a few things. Chrome's rise, obviously, and that whole shift to everyone using the internet on their phones. And then there's the whole Google situation.
Yeah, the Google situation. Okay, let's rewind back to the early 2000s for a minute. Imagine the internet like the Wild West. Microsoft's Internet Explorer is the sheriff. Slow, clunky, but everyone used it because, well, it was just there.
Right, by default.
Then Firefox explodes onto the scene. Sleek, shiny, user-friendly, like the Robin Hood of browsers, stealing us away from the evil Microsoft empire.
I like that analogy. And it's easy to forget how revolutionary Firefox actually was back then.
Oh, totally.
Tabs, a search bar right there in the browser, and the pop-up blocker, which was, what a lifesaver. Those were huge changes that actually made browsing fun.
It's like a breath of fresh air.
Right. And then there was the whole open source thing, too. Anyone could contribute, help build it, which led to a ton of innovation.
But that open source model, while amazing for creativity and all, maybe it also made it tough to keep up with the giants, especially Google.
Exactly. You can't really compete with their resources.
Right. Google basically has all the money in the world.
Basically. And that brings us to 2008, when Google launched Chrome. It was sleek, it was fast, and most importantly, it was tied to, well, the biggest search engine on the planet.
So it's like Google showed up to a knife fight with a tank.
Yeah, pretty much. And they were smart about it, too. They made Chrome the default browser on Android phones, which were just starting to become everyone's go-to device. Meanwhile, Firefox, they decided to bet on their own mobile operating system, Firefox OS.
Which, if I remember correctly, didn't really take off.
Yeah, it flopped. And that misstep basically let Chrome become the king of the mobile world, while Firefox got left behind.
Ouch. Missing the mobile boat, that was a huge blow. But here's where things get a little strange. Firefox might be losing users, but their finances are, well, surprisingly good.
Right. It's a bit of a paradox.
It's almost like they have a secret stash of cash they forgot about.
Well, that secret stash is actually a deal they have with, you guessed it, Google.
Oh, here we go.
Firefox makes Google their default search engine, and in return, they get a nice big payment. It brings in a lot of money for Mozilla, the folks behind Firefox.
Oh, I feel like there's a but coming.
But it also makes them incredibly dependent on their biggest competitor.
That sounds risky.
Oh, it is. And here's where those articles you sent get really interesting.
Uh-oh.
Google was just convicted of some pretty serious antitrust violations in the U.S.
Okay, so that's got to be a problem for Firefox.
A big one. A judge could now decide to limit or even ban these kinds of search engine deals altogether.
Whoa.
And if that happens, well, Firefox loses their main source of income.
So not only are they fighting to hold on to their users, but their financial safety net could just vanish.
Exactly. Talk about a tough spot. And then there's the legal trouble brewing over in Europe, too. Remember that?
Oh, right. On top of everything else, Firefox is getting sued, right?
Yep. NOIB, a privacy group based in Austria, they're suing Firefox. They say that Firefox's new tracking feature violates those big GDPR privacy rules.
Hold on. A privacy-focused browser is being accused of tracking users.
It's pretty ironic, isn't it?
Like, seriously ironic.
It really makes you question, can we actually trust any browser these days?
Right. And it shows how seriously people are taking this whole data privacy thing. Even Firefox isn't off the hook.
Not at all. So this new tracking feature, it's called Privacy Preserving Attribution, or PPA for short.
PPA, okay.
And the goal is to, well, track user behavior, but without actually revealing their identity.
So how's that even possible?
That's the tricky part. Firefox claims that it's actually more private than the traditional way of tracking because it scrambles the user data.
Scrambles it how?
It makes it harder to identify any one individual.
Okay, I'm still a little fuzzy on this. Like, what kind of data are we even talking about?
It's pretty technical, but essentially when you click an ad or visit a website, PPA sends a coded message back to the advertiser. This message has info about what you did, but it's scrambled so they can't directly link it back to you.
So it's like a secret code.
Kind of, yeah. And Firefox says this helps advertisers figure out how well their ads are working without building those detailed profiles on individual users. The ones that creep everyone out.
Right, right. But the group that filed the lawsuit, NOYB, they're not buying it, right?
Nope. They argue that even though the data is anonymized, it could still be used to figure out who people are, especially if it's combined with other information the advertisers might have.
Ah, I see. So it's not as anonymous as it seems.
Exactly. And they're also questioning whether Firefox even has the right to gather this data at all, even if it's for these privacy-preserving reasons.
So basically, this whole PPA thing is kind of a gray area.
Yeah, there's no easy answer here. And I think it brings up a bigger issue. Even those browsers that say they're all about privacy, they're constantly trying to balance, protecting our data while still making money.
It's a tricky situation for sure.
It is. And Firefox really needs to prove that PPA does what it claims and that it's worth the risk to users' trust.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, that Firefox doesn't survive all this. What are the alternatives out there for people who really care about their privacy?
Well, that's where those articles you sent get super interesting. They go through a whole bunch of contenders, each with their pluses and minuses.
Okay, lay it on me. What are our options?
Well, first up, we've got Microsoft Edge making a bit of a comeback after that whole Internet Explorer debacle.
Really? Edge? I haven't had that name in ages.
I know, right? But it's actually pretty decent now. It's built on the same base as Chrome.
Oh, you mean Chromium?
Yes.
Yeah.
Chromium. So it's fast and all, but it also makes you wonder about the privacy side of things.
Speaking of Chromium, can you explain what that is exactly? For those of us who don't spend all day in the tech world.
Sure. Chromium is basically the foundation of a web browser. It's open source, which means anyone can use it to create their own browser.
Ah, got it. So Chrome uses it and so does Edge.
Yep. Opera too, and a whole bunch of others. The good thing is that it makes building browsers a lot easier. But the downside is that you might end up with less variety and maybe more control coming from Google, since they're still a big part of how Chromium is developed.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got Edge, which uses Chromium. What else is out there?
Well, there's Safari, of course, Apple's browser.
Right, Safari.
Known for being super speedy and working great with anything Apple.
Of course.
But the catch is that it only works on Apple devices, so it's not an option for everyone.
Yeah, true. What about Opera?
Opera's been around forever, it seems like, and they're known for packing in a ton of features.
I remember Opera.
But guess what? It's built on Chromium, too.
Figures. So are there any browsers that are really focused on privacy? Like truly focused, not just a little better than Chrome?
Well, there are two names that keep coming up, Brave and Tor. Both have built their whole reputation on privacy, but they go about it in very different ways.
I've heard of Brave. They've got their own cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, they have that Brave Rewards program. You can earn BT, which stands for Basic Attention Tokens,
Me too, okay.
by opting into ads that respect your privacy. Then you can use those tokens to tip websites or creators you like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But what about their privacy features compared to Firefox, especially with all the controversy surrounding Firefox's new tracking system?
Well, this is where Brave really shines. They block ads and trackers like it's their mission in life, which I guess it kind of is. You don't even have to mess around with complicated settings. It just works. Plus, they have a built-in Tor mode.
Tor mode?
Yeah, for completely anonymous browsing. And they even have a built-in VPN for an extra layer of security.
Wow, they're serious about this stuff. So is Brave the clear winner when it comes to privacy?
Well, hold on a second. Firefox still has some advantages. Remember that password manager lockdown feature?
Right, the one that makes it harder for hackers to steal your passwords.
Yep, that one. Brave doesn't have anything like that yet.
Good point. What about the whole pure open source argument? How does Brave compare to Firefox on that front?
It's complicated. Brave is open source, but they're built on Chromium, right? So some people argue that it's not as independent as Firefox. They say that Firefox is more dedicated to a truly open web because they're not using Google's codebase.
So it sounds like there are trade-offs with each browser.
Exactly. More aggressive tracking protection with Brave, but maybe stronger password security and a more independent development approach with Firefox.
So which one is better really depends on what you're looking for.
You got it. Ultimately, the best browser for you depends on what you value most.
Okay, that makes sense. But this whole discussion is making me think about the bigger picture here. Even if Firefox makes it through all these challenges, what does this mean for browsing in the future? Will privacy finally be the thing that makes people switch browsers?
That's the million-dollar question. And to be honest, it's tough to say for sure, but the sources you shared, they hint at some interesting trends. It seems like Firefox is really banking on privacy as their way to stand out. You know what I mean?
So are they basically saying, hey, if you're worried about big tech having all your data, we're the browser for you?
Yeah, I think that's the message they're trying to send.
Makes sense too. People are way more aware of data privacy these days than they used to be.
Right, and they're definitely looking for alternatives to the big guys like Google, who've been collecting their data for, well, forever.
It's almost like Firefox is trying to go back to their roots, you know? Like back in the day, they were the privacy-focused alternative to Internet Explorer. And now they're trying to reclaim that title in a world where Chrome is king.
Exactly. But the big question is, will it be enough?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
The sources we've been looking at, they suggest that a couple of things need to happen for Firefox to really succeed. First, they have to actually follow through on all their privacy promises.
Right, they can't afford another misstep, that PPA controversy.
Exactly. And second, they need to figure out how to make money without relying on those search engine deals. Because, like we said, those could disappear any day now.
So it's like they need to prove to people they're both trustworthy and indeed worth paying for, which is a tough sell.
It is, especially when everyone's so used to getting their browsers for free.
Speaking of free, what about those other privacy-focused browsers we talked about? Brave and Tor. Do you think they have a chance in this whole battle for the future of browsing?
Oh, absolutely. Brave is already gaining a lot of traction with its aggressive ad blocking and that built-in Tor mode.
Yeah, Brave seems to be pretty popular.
And then there's Tor, which is all about anonymity. You know, being able to bypass censorship. It's still a super powerful tool for journalists, activists, anyone who really needs to protect their identity online.
But Tor is more for like, I don't know, secret agent stuff, right? Not really your everyday internet use.
True, Tor can be a bit slow and clunky to use. It's not really meant for watching Netflix or playing games. But for specific tasks, like if you're a whistleblower or you need to access a website that's blocked in your country, it's essential.
It's like having a secret weapon in your browser arsenal.
I like that.
Hmm.
You might not need it every day, but when you do need it, there's nothing else like it. And that brings us to one of the key takeaways from all these articles. The future of browsing is all about having choices.
I like that. Choices.
It's about having different options that meet different needs. Some people might be all about speed and convenience. Others might prioritize privacy and security above everything else.
It's like having the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Exactly. And just like you have different tools for different tasks in the real world, you should have different browsers for different tasks online.
This whole conversation has definitely made me think differently about my own browser choices.
Mm.
I've always just used whatever came with my computer, but now I realize there are other options out there.
And that's really what it's all about, becoming aware of those options.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the internet is constantly changing. The tools we use today might be totally different tomorrow. New technologies are always emerging, new threats are popping up. The whole landscape is shifting all the time.
It's a lot to keep up with, that's for sure.
And it is, but it's also exciting. It means that we have the power to shape what the internet becomes by being informed, by asking questions, and by making deliberate choices about the tools we use. We can push for a more open, secure, and privacy-respecting internet.
I love that. So to all our listeners out there, as you navigate this ever-changing digital world, remember to choose your tools wisely. Your privacy and the future of the internet could depend on it.